And good afternoon to you, Chris, and welcome back to Encore. And welcome to everybody who's on the call. As Chris said, Chris is a respected economist and author on finances, retirement, and work in an aging America. He is also well known to Encore as he spoke on his book on retirement at an Encore event 3 years ago. And he was also scheduled to be keynote speaker at our Wisdom and Experience Awards event to recognize age-friendly employers, which was to be held in October, but which has been rescheduled to next year. Chris's current book, Purpose and Paycheck, is not only a discussion of the economic implications of a changing workforce in our aging society, but is full of his inspiring interviews with people over 50 who are creating new directions for satisfying work. And as I said to Chris, reading it, I felt like I was part of a huge tribe of interesting people out there. I don't know how you find the time to meet and talk and interview so many people, but I guess you do it like you're doing it today.
Right. It's fun. I enjoy it. Yes.
So tell us, Chris, what was your goal in writing Purpose and a Paycheck?
Well, just before I get to that, thank you very much for having me. And I just have to say hello to Bevan, and I have to say hello to Kitty, who we have done several events together over the years and had many conversations over the years. And it's just wonderful to see both of you. And I'm glad everyone is safe and healthy. The reason why I wrote Purpose and a Paycheck is it's part of a movement. It's a book that feeds into a growing movement that is recognizing the value that experienced workers bring to our economy and to our society. And you know all the stereotypes that are holding people back. And I started off Purpose and a Paycheck with looking specifically at the area of creativity. And back in 2014, I think it was, I went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York and went to exhibit with Matisse. And it was his cutouts, the famous, the pool, the blue nude. It was, some of his what art historians consider his greatest work. And Matisse did it the last decade of his life. He died at age 84, and he did it from his bed in his wheelchair. And yet it was the height of his creativity. And then when you start looking at more and more of the arts and skilled tradespeople and the professions, you find more and more examples, not just artists, but people being more and more creative throughout the course of their life, that they're more creative in their 60s than they were in their 50s, and they're more creative in their 70s than they were in their 60s. And then that fed into one area in our economy where people 50 and over have really had an influence, which is starting their own business, self-employment, starting an own business. And, when you start your own business, it's a very creative endeavor. And you have to do a lot of connecting the dots, and you're tapping into your skills. And most people who are starting a new business also are learning new skills. And, because we're living in this technology world, and you're learning things like Monkey Chimp, and you're learning how to use WordPress and all kinds of things. So it ended up being a book about, here's all this opportunity that is out there that we could get this economy to really be growing a lot faster and a lot stronger. Obviously, this is pre-COVID. And there's all this untapped potential. And where you can really see the potential is when you look at the second half entrepreneur.
Thank you, Chris. I'd just like to speak to the whole idea of creativity for just a second. They've done a lot of research and studies into creativity as people age, and have found that people can be quite creative in the later years of life. I mean, this is scientific. This isn't just, us talking about it.
Yeah.
It is a fact. And one of the things that impressed me about the stories that you told in your book was that not only creative types and white collar people, but blue collar workers are just as creative as other people. I mean, it's not something that's reserved for intellectuals and artists and so forth. I particularly like the part of your book where you talked about when you were a merchant seaman and how people who you worked alongside of, blue collar workers, were very creative in creating new part-time jobs, gigs, they would call them today. And so creativity is not something that is the province of just the highly educated, the white collar, the artists.
No, and I think what really matters is skill and engagement, right? It's skill, engagement, and curiosity. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, some of the merchant seamen that I worked with, I mean, they came with these sort of incredible lifestyles, and one of them, you know, stands out that I think I wrote about, where he wanted to own land, so Ozarks, bought 100 acres of land, put a double wide trailer on there, and then during the hunting season, he would hunt, and then he'd fill up the freezer, and then he would go to sea. But his wife ran also a small shop in town. And so they always had these sort of multiple incomes coming in, a portfolio, which is now what we talk about a lot, right? About creating a portfolio of activities. And one of the, for the book, one of the really wonderful places I went to was in Pittsburgh, and it's a nonprofit organization for machinists, and it teaches anybody of any age, but they're mostly young people, oftentimes people coming out of the military, so they're probably in their late 20s, early 30s, to become machinists. And the instructors were in their 80s because they had lost all the machinists that were in their 60s because the pay is so good and the demand was so great that they all left. And so the instructors were in their late 70s, early 80s, and none of them expected to ever be a teacher. That wasn't just part of their thought process. And yet they all loved being a teacher, and they all loved passing on their knowledge. And the thing is, the machinists did not call themselves skilled labor. They called themselves artists, because what they created was art. And, you know, when I sat down with one of them and we had this conversation, the first thing he did, he's pulling off this plastic for the medical industry, little that he had created, and then some other things that he had built. And then after a while, we had this conversation and he goes, you know, Chris, I like you. Okay, I do. So if you want to know how to make really good red wine, and then he goes through this whole process. You get the grapes from Napa Valley, and you don't ferment them in your garage for 3 months. You do it for 6 months. And then the real trick is you add a little bit of blackberry brandy. And so, you know, you're getting these stories. You have to remember that, but you're getting these stories, and it's all about giving back, how much they loved working with the students, how much they loved passing on their knowledge, and they're still engaged. And one of them, for example, was also working at Costco. And I said, why are you working at Costco? And he says, well, you know, here's the thing. I'm the guy that's handing out the food at Costco. Now, everybody wants to talk to the person that's handing out food. So he says, you know, I have a great weekend. I talk to people. Another guy was on this thing where he would go to the flea markets on the weekends. And, you know, he was really proud. He'd bought 40 DeWalt tools. They are lacking batteries. And he bought them for $1 and he sold them for 10. He's 78 years old. Again, it was fun. And so I think that one of the things that we have to be very careful of in this whole conversation is that it's about skill and engagement. Education helps, but you can be highly educated in a career, but not necessarily have a lot of formal degrees.
Well, Chris, I stand before you as a shining example of somebody learning a new skill. 6 years ago, when I retired from being a financial advisor and thought I would start coaching people about planning for retirement, my son told me I had to have a website. Well, I had no idea of how to create a website, but he did. And I created my first website. And then a gentleman in a class I was in told me how to do a PowerPoint presentation. And there we were. I took off and never looked back. So everything we've done with Encore, it goes back to the website, the PowerPoint, and the ability it gave me to engage with people. And now today we have Zoom, and I think there's 25, 30 people on this call that, so yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are able to learn new things and create. But you make the point in your book that with the aging of the US population, employers will need older workers. It's not like they can afford to just ignore them because of their knowledge and experience. And we aren't creating a lot of new young people because of the decline in our birth rate. So you quote several economists and leaders in human relations that, in fact, older workers are the key to increasing U.S. productivity and prosperity, not an afterthought, key.
Yeah.
Would you comment?
So in 15 years, and only in 15 years, for the first time in US history, there'll be more people 65 years and older than 18 and under. And this is a long-term trend, and the workforce is aging, and that is an underlying trend through the tragedy and the trauma that we're going through right now. And so in the pre-COVID world, if you're looking toward the end of 2019, when the unemployment rate was down around 3.5%, you were starting really by that point to really, in the surveys, to sort of see a real sea change in management's attitude. Now, it's going from an attitude of looking at their experienced workers and wondering, when are you going to retire, to starting to say, if this person retires, there's a lot of knowledge and experience that goes out the door, and I'm having trouble hiring people. How do I keep this worker around? We hadn't done the complete sea change, but there were some, in Minnesota here, for example, there was a company, and it does skilled machining for the oil and gas industry, the airline industry, a number of industries. And they were investing in automation. And the question was, well, why are you investing in automation? And the assumption was to replace workers. But the reason why they're investing in automation is they didn't want their 60-year-olds to retire. And so they wanted to make the job easier to do so that they would hang around, because there was a gap in, they had a lot of young people, but didn't have very many middle-aged people, and then they had these older workers. So the automation was being to keep the experienced workers around longer so that they could fulfill their contracts, and also to teach the ropes, the intangibles, to the younger workers. That conversation, variations of that conversation, was happening more and more. Then, of course, we entered the COVID economy, the pandemic recession, where you had 22 million people unemployed in March and April. We've now come back a little bit, and we're about 11.5 million people unemployed. So we're in a very different economy right now. But nonetheless, what is the underlying factor is, when the pandemic recession is in the rearview mirror, and the unemployment rate does go down, that again, it's going to put pressure on management to think differently about experience.
So, Chris, you were very optimistic about the prospects for experienced workers when you wrote your book. And obviously, things have happened since. Are you saying that you still feel optimistic about the prospects, but that maybe it's a little further out? And how far out do you think it would be before employers wake up again that they have to think about this?
So I think it's farther out. And look, one of the things, there's many things we don't know when we're trying to figure out how is COVID-19 changing the world of work. We have some good guesses. For example, we know that about a third of jobs could be done remotely before COVID. The evidence is that's expanded to about half of jobs can be done remotely. And that's going to continue to a certain extent. And we know that more workers are going to be working from home more hours, but how many hours is that? A little bit unclear. But we are moving toward much more of a digital economy. So in terms of thinking about, the older worker, I think it's going to be a harsh environment. And the reason why it's going to be a harsh environment is the pressure is really clear. You're going to need to work longer to earn a paycheck is growing thanks to COVID, because nobody's making any money off of interest rates right now. So your classic, retirement savings, make some income off your bonds. It anchors maybe some of the riskier parts of your portfolio. Right now, people aren't making income. Even doing a gig economy part-time job, you'll make more money than you will clipping your coupons. So that the pressure on people to work longer is going to grow. Employers are in somewhat of the driver's seat. And employers are in a position now where they can be choosier than they could back in 2019. So how this and there is this additional factor, and I don't know how this plays out, which is health discrimination on top of age discrimination. Older people are clearly more vulnerable to COVID-19. That's pretty much there. So there can be a wariness about hiring people who are older, worried about the health. On the other hand, I've done a number of events with human resources people, and there's a real concern about how do you hire younger people, bring them into your organization, and teach them the intangibles, teach them how the job is really done. And we all know there's a formal book that says this is how the job gets done. It doesn't get done that way. They're the intangibles. This is how the job gets done. And how do you teach that on Zoom? How do you teach that remotely? So there, the experienced worker becomes much more valuable because they already have a lot of those intangibles. They already have that stock of knowledge. So how does that play out? In the end, I think it really does come down to when does the labor market get tight again? When do employers start complaining that they can't find the workers that they need? And then you get a stronger argument, the workers are there. You're just not looking.
Okay. You have any sense of time frame for all this recovery?
I think if there's one thing that we have learned during this period of time, there is a false debate about COVID versus the economy. Progress against the coronavirus is progress on the economy. If you don't have progress on the coronavirus, you don't have progress on the economy. Those are two sides of the same coin. So if everybody wears a mask, if everyone social distances, if everyone washes their hands, if everyone is cautious in the environments that they're in, the economy can be stronger. And then, of course, we are going to get therapeutics and we are going to get some vaccines, but they're down the road. In the meantime, the less that we do those things, the more that we open up carelessly, and then the virus can pick up, then the economy is going to be weaker. So health and the economy, two sides of the same coin.
Given the fact that this may be off a while, but employers still need to retain skill and experience that they do have. And it's always, at least the last I knew, it was cheaper to keep your skills and experience rather than to replace it. It costs money to replace people, and it costs money to train young people. You had a lot of recommendations for flexibility in providing public and private benefits to enable people to work longer and prepare financially for retirement, because that's not going to go away as an important issue, not only for individuals, but for our society. I mean, if people can't afford to save for a retirement, then that's going to be a burden on society. So you've talked about in your book about phased retirement, flexibility in hours, flexibility with regard to healthcare plans, and so forth for a more mobile benefits. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, I think that, when you look at all the surveys, the human resource surveys, I think one of the key results is this desire for flexibility, and it cuts across different age groups for different reasons. And one of the positive things that comes out of this, and the numbers are always squishy. They're not very good numbers, but looking at as good as numbers as you have, if you're looking at large corporations, about 70% of the workforce of large corporations could have worked remotely, but only about 3 to 7% were. And so the only ones that were the ones that were traveling, that was part of their job that they had to do. And the main reason came down to partially power. You weren't working if you weren't visible, partially on a more positive, collaborative, get people in the same building, have them exchange ideas. I think one of the positive changes is people working remotely are incredibly productive. And you don't have to have them in the building for them to be productive. So I think that is a positive change on the flexibility side. And I think management is absorbing that. And then the collaboration side is a much bigger challenge, and that's a lot harder to figure out how to do. But this demand for flexibility, it's there, and it's going to increase. And really, a lot of the questions are public policy questions. So if you want a more flexible economy and society, you need to have universal health insurance. It's just, how you design that, you can, we could debate that, but you need to be able to, if you lose your job, you shouldn't lose health insurance, and your family shouldn't lose health insurance. Plus, if you have universal health insurance and universal retirement, then, hey, if you got an entrepreneurial idea, why not try and pursue it? It's always very disturbing to look at the numbers. Back in the early 1990s, looking at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the U.S. was around 3 and 4 in terms of women's labor force participation rate. We're now down around 20, 22. And what has happened is that other countries have put in more flexible, family-friendly policies, which enables people to work. One of the things that's coming out of this recession is, and one of the big worries is, this has really been a women recession. And it is partly because of the industries that it's hit, but it's also partly because of remote schooling and all the other things that are going on right now. And so this is intolerable, and it's a real hurt to our economy. So a lot of it is going to end up being on the public policy side, but I do think that employers recognize that in the digital economy, flexibility is not just something to talk about. Flexibility actually is something to realize. If we have more flexible policies in the competition for talent, the competition for experience, we'll have an edge.
Okay, great. Well, there's room for hope, I guess, that
you always got to be hopeful.
I'm a big believer in hope. But listening to you talk, Chris, it sounds like in your book, you did comment a lot on the increase of older entrepreneurs and the advantages they bring to a startup culture. So what would you say are the keys for people to make the transition into self-employment, even given the economy as it is right now? I mean, I think people can be enormously creative in creating something new in terms of work for themselves. It's always the best way, at least as I understood it, was to identify needs and develop something that meets the needs. And I've never forgotten learning about the people who created a business here in Florida. They happen to be divers, and they developed a business laying people's ashes on out at sea for people on reefs. I mean, the people are capable, I think, of a lot of great ideas, but is it possible, even in the economy we are in today, for people to move into entrepreneurship?
So I think so. This is an unusual recession. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal the other day, where this is a very unusual recession in that credit scores have improved. Now, typically credit scores go down in a recession. They've improved during this recession. And then there's something else that's going on, which is that we're having record. Now, the data only goes back to 2004, by the way, but we're having record new business filings, absolutely off the charts, and increases of over about 78, 80% from last year. So what's going on here? What is, and I got in touch with the Census Bureau, which collects the data. They don't break it down by age. That eventually we will get the age data, but the data that's coming out right now doesn't have it. So we don't know how much of that is the older entrepreneur who's been pushed out, lost their job, or has decided in this economy, this is the right thing to do. But I think one of the most optimistic things during this period of time is that more and more people are embracing entrepreneurship. And where the experienced worker has advantages, part of it is we live in this tech economy. And so, the cost of starting a business has gone way down. And typically your home is the office or your apartment. I would have added co-sharing space in the pre-COVID world, and in the post-COVID world, we'll add the co-sharing space, but that's not really a possibility right now. So you're usually doing it out of your home. And then the data is, it used to be, if we went back 15 years ago, the idea of starting your own business in your 60s, I mean, you'd be going, you're crazy. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Don't tap into that 401k. But the thing is, people aren't tapping into their 401k to do it. The typical small business that's started by someone 50 and over is $5,000 or less. And as I say, their home, the office is the home. And what they're doing is they're taking their skill. Because what does an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur solves a problem. That's all an entrepreneur does. So they're taking their skill, their knowledge, their experience, and they're solving problems. Now, typically, often they're selling back to their previous employer. Hopefully, they're charging them a lot more money than their employer was paying them before. It's a nice little piece of revenge, can be anyway. But they're going back to their previous employer, but they're using their skill, their knowledge, or they've had some sort of avocation, some sort of passion, something that they just loved over the years. And they figure out a way that they can turn that into a business. But their stock of knowledge is, because of their passion, they actually understand the market. They understand the market really well. So again, solving a problem. So we're talking about small business in the Encore years. It's typically maybe no employees, it's self-employment. Maybe it's one or two employees, or it's a group of people who have known each other over the years, and they don't create a formal partnership, but they create an informal partnership. And here's a project, graphic designer, I'm a writer. This person actually knows how to write a grant, and you get together for a particular project and you do it together. You're with people that you like working with. Next project comes along, all it needs is a writer. Then, I'm the only person that goes for that. So I think we need to understand better what is happening. And one of the things in a post-COVID world that I hope is there had been greater conversation about these co-sharing workspaces, these incubators, deliberately opening themselves to people 50 and over. Because if you look at all the advertisements and you look at the discussion, it's always someone with, wearing fleece and a beard, or, running through the Colorado mountains, or canoeing through the Florida Everglades, and kind of ignoring the potential there with the older entrepreneur. So, and actually, if you go to a lot of these places, by the way, if you just walk through them, a lot of times half are 40 and over, half are 50 and over. So it's just that they were ignoring them. So it would be more deliberate. But again, it's about your skill, your knowledge, your experience. And, kind of at a core, most of us would like to be our own boss at some point. And, we get tired of being told to do more with less. And if I'm going to do more with less, might as well do more with less for myself.
I have to laugh, Chris, because back in 1988, I was in commercial banking at the time. And my boss, who wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree, used to love to have these meetings after work that we drone on and on about the numbers and how much money did you lend or get back? And it just, it was such a waste of human time that finally at one meeting I said, I'm sorry, I have to leave for another event. And when he said, do you really? And I said, yeah, I do really. And I got up and I left. And I handed in my resignation the next day because I was determined that I wasn't going to allow some fool to steal my life's time and energy away from me. And I've basically been self-employed ever since.
Yeah. And as you
Um,
know, being self-employed is not easy.
oh no.
It's not easy at all. And so I don't want to be romantic about being self-employed, but I think that it is a viable option for a lot of people. And really the key here is that it's building, again, it's that notion of solving problems in that, when you're in your 50s and your 60s, you've developed skills, you have knowledge, you have the ability to solve problems for people. And so if you can make some money off of that, why not? And the other evidence, there's survey evidence that people, Urban Institute, I've seen it through them, and there might be some other people, are happier, even though they're making less money. Typically, you're making less money than your peer who's still fully employed, full-time job with benefits. Making less money, typically are happier. It's also easier, you were mentioning earlier about phase retirement. It's also oftentimes easier to sort of downshift as you want to go on your glide path, if that's what you want to do. If you're self-employed, you can kind of make those decisions along the way. I was just talking to a friend who's decided not to take a contract because it would just eat up too much time. And they've got enough to keep them going. But, they have that freedom, that flexibility to decide, I need some time and I'm going to turn down this contract. Now they're not going from turning down a contract to no money. They're going from turning down a contract, having more time, they're still earning an income.
In your book, you also had some very interesting suggestions about how employers and communities can develop programs to assist people in becoming entrepreneurs as mature and skilled and experienced workers. And I think of it often. I know here in Boca Raton, FAU, Florida Atlantic University, has a big emphasis on tech incubators and programs for entrepreneurship around younger kids. But I don't see a whole lot with universities. I don't know what employers are doing to help mature workers move into entrepreneurships. I do think that there are some communities, and here in South Florida, I think the city of Boynton Beach is very much oriented towards encouragement of entrepreneurship, people of all ages, but certainly older people. Do you want to say just a bit about what you've seen as programs and to help communities and employers help people move into entrepreneurship?
There's not much and it's very scattered. I think it's more along the lines of, here's a really good program, and like PBS Next Avenue will write a column about it and say, this should be copied, this should be emulated. So you do see stuff out there. One of the ideas that I had, which you have there's examples in Britain, I'm not aware of any here, which is as an employee benefit, the company would pay for you to take your entrepreneurial courses and wouldn't cost you that much money. And it would be kind of a way of, this is recognizing that we might be moving toward a world where certain workers want to go out of the company, but they also may want to come back to the company, going back and forth. So there's some of that going on elsewhere. I'm not aware of it too much that's going on here. Again, I say there's been a lot some examples of co-sharing workspaces that have made more of an emphasis. There has been a conversation, I think this is going to be right, that as we move more toward a world of remote work, more and more companies are going to routinely pay for a co-sharing workspace membership, so that people aren't always just working out of their home. They may go in their neighborhood, they may go nearby, not necessarily commuting all the way to the office, because they may not be welcome depending on how many people you want in the office at any one time. But isolation is a real issue. So there is a fair amount of discussion. So that would benefit experienced workers also, because it would be a company benefit. But we're really not that far along. The good news is, though, if you want to learn about entrepreneurship, there are so many resources in so many communities. And one of the communities that I write about is St. Petersburg. And when I was there with Kitty and Bevan, for example, just some of the advantage, some of the resources that are available there, and there are so many free resources available that anybody who wants to start a business can tap into those resources. And the other thing is, despite this image that entrepreneurs have that they're these loners who couldn't get along with people, and that's why they had to be entrepreneurs, because they couldn't work in an organization. Entrepreneurs as a group really want to help other entrepreneurs succeed. I've been stunned and surprised and heartened by their entrepreneurs are often willing to share information with people who might end up being competitors. How do you price your product? How do you market your product? Here's the biggest mistake that I made. And so what has always surprised me is, if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, and just say you're thinking about owning some rental properties, why don't you go to all the meetings that landlords have, which they have a lot of meetings, you have organizations, and talk to people about, okay, so what's it like to be a landlord? What are the issues that you deal with? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? And the thing is, people will share their knowledge, and it's part of your research. So there's resources. Those resources are often free. There's lots of entrepreneurs, older entrepreneurs, that want to mentor new entrepreneurs. Colleges and universities have not, they've embraced entrepreneurship, but they're largely focused on younger people. But I think, again, if you think about the longer term and where we're going, I'll make my forecast, which is that in 30 years, when you walk on a university campus, on any university campus, it will be a multi-generational institution. That there will not, right now, when you walk on a university campus, it's dominated by the 18 to 28-year-old age group. That's kind of your core, and really 18 to 24. But I think there is going to be a fundamental shift in that. Just sort of the thing that you're talking about, these are going to become multi-generational institutions, which, by the way, is how they're going to stay alive, because the economics of higher education are changing dramatically.
That's an excellent point. I oftentimes think about the fact that given the decline in young people going on to university, a wise organization would seek other groups of people to market to more. I mean, that would be just a natural thing. And if universities have programs on entrepreneurship for young people, couldn't they just as easily have programs? They don't have to be degree programs for mature entrepreneurs.
Very much so. And there's a lot of discussion, and there's, when it comes to change, it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of discussion. Here's a logical change. This should happen. This should happen. This should happen. And you keep getting despairing. Then all of a sudden things change very, very quickly. They happen and what tips it over that way. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of discussion recognizing this, and, that we need to be reaching out. And there's a whole thing about nano certificates, because one of the things that you learn as you get older and you want to stay engaged in the workforce is, one, you probably can't afford, but two, you really don't want to spend a whole year on a university campus getting a degree. But you want a certificate, and you want something that says to an employer, hey, I've done this. And by the way, says to an employer, if you get it, in one town in Florida, in Sarasota, Florida, that it's going to be valuable in Tampa, Florida. So, or it can be valuable in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So this is one of the areas that these nano certificates, these small certificates, as people go back, and yes, we still want to take that Renaissance Italy class that we never took when we were an undergraduate. Yeah, we'd still like to do that. But what we really want to do is also come back and gain a skill or a certificate that says that we've gained a skill to an employer, that therefore some of the things that you were talking about earlier, they can be less worried about.
Unfortunately, things seem to take longer to come about than they should. And speaking of time, Chris will have to leave in about 10 minutes, I think. So if people have questions, you need to be putting them in the chat. I don't know whether we have any questions in the chat right now.
Not at the moment.
Okay. So I will ask another question. Chris, staying on the subject of entrepreneurship for just a bit, Encore Palm Beach County has worked for 4 years to develop the resources for people to find work and to volunteer. We don't place people in jobs. We try to refer people to the resources that can help them find work and to direct them to the nonprofits that need their help. We haven't done so much around entrepreneurship. Is there anything you would recommend that we focus some energy on in the coming year?
So what I'd be doing is, and you may already know them, you've already done this, but meeting with the people who have the incubators, who have the co-sharing workspaces, who have the accelerators, this sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem, and raise their awareness and ask just what you said, how can we link with you? How can we tie into you? How can we open up to this market? And everyone's struggling right now in this ecosystem, partly because it's harder to get together. But again, people are always, remember, these are entrepreneurial organizations, and I think you would approach them with an entrepreneurial idea about how to expand their market, about how to expand their horizons, about thinking about what might be the opportunities and who, because I think a lot of times the way that these organizations think about older people is, if they're entrepreneurs, they think about them as mentors, which is a good thing. But what you're doing is saying, not as mentors, but is actually coming in and starting a business, a new business on their own. And they want to be part of your ecosystem. And and if they say, well, will that really work? It's a very good Brookings Institution study from a couple of years ago on why urban entrepreneurial ecosystems should deliberately include the older person into that ecosystem. And it makes a very persuasive argument. And it has a couple examples from Chattanooga, Tennessee is one of them I remember. I think there are 3 main examples that they highlight. But again, this is, it kind of lays out a program, why you would do this, and what has been some of the experience of people who are doing this. And I think one of the things that comes out of this period of time is you can also lay the rest that these people actually, they understand technology. They know technology. Okay. You don't have to worry about that. The people who will be coming into your door, because here's the thing, there's been this myth about technology. And the myth is that, as you get older, you just really not too good at this technology. And it would always drive me crazy, because if you think about my career after I was a merchant seaman, my first office job, I had an IBM Selectric. And if you didn't hit the enter button, you could erase the line. You didn't have to use whiteout. This was incredible. This was like the best thing that ever happened. And then you go to a dedicated word processor, then you go to the PC, and then, you go on and on. So this notion that you can't learn this stuff. And by the way, in the pre-COVID world, when you walk through the airport, who's using, the tablets? It's either very young people or it's older people are using the tablets. So I just think that, and what this experience has shown with Zoom is, even in your assisted living centers and your continuing care communities, Zoom is just a really, really big deal. So I just think that one of the things that comes out of this is this whole technology stereotype just completely falls apart. And there are 80-year-olds that are learning Zoom. It's just not that hard. But the thing is, people think, well, that's remarkable. It's actually not that remarkable. They probably started out with a typewriter.
I know I did.
Yeah.
My mother made me take, and I've always been very grateful. My mother made me take typewriting classes in summer when I was in high school. And I'm a whiz on the computer, quite frankly. I can type faster than, well, almost anybody.
I took the class, but I still type with two fingers.
Yeah, no, my son still types with two fingers, but I use all of them. And
Rosemary, we do have a few questions for Chris.
Yeah.
Bevan has asked, it may be a good opportunity to look nationally for organizations that are teaching older entrepreneurs, since everyone can do it virtual. Can you think of any national programs? Is there something maybe that AARP offers?
So AARP has something. I haven't looked at it that closely, but you're absolutely right. AARP does. There's an organization in New York that has been expanding, Senior Planet, which is very good, and it's been expanding, and it's aggressive and has stuff online. So, but AARP has, and they came out with a report last year about the role of entrepreneurship. They've been having their innovation, and then the Kaufman Foundation is probably one of the best resources for anybody of any age to be tapping into for knowledge about starting your own business, and it's all free.
What was that organization?
Kaufman Foundation in Kansas City.
The Kaufman Foundation. Okay.
Yep. Okay. And also we have a question. What is your next book, Chris? What is your next approach here?
I've been thinking about this. So it's one of the things that I've been thinking about. There are a number of ideas that are intriguing me, but I have not settled on one.
Okay. And a few people would be interested in connecting with you or learning more. What is your broadcasting schedule? How can people hear more about you and what you have out there?
So I have a new podcast called Small Change, Money Stories from the Neighborhood, which is going into lower income communities, people with unstable incomes who have figured out how to work together to buy a home, start a business. And it's smallchangestories.org, O-R-G is that website. And then my email address is cfarrell@mpr.org. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. Mm-hmm. And my schedule on Marketplace is it's every 2 weeks, but which day it actually falls on just tends to depend on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and of course, you can always get Chris's books from Amazon, and there's a list of them at chrisfarrell.net. So, Chris, do you have any last words? I know you have to go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, this has been wonderful, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think that this is understatement of the year. We're going through a really hard time, and it's hard on so many levels. But the aging of the population is continuing, and the opportunities opened up by an aging population. We can't lose sight of that. And I think that just in the conversations, I was in a conference and someone said, what at the Urban Institute said, what little thing can we do? What little thing? And Ruth Finkelstein is a wonderful person, said, well, the one thing you can do is always say your age, and just matter-of-factly, routinely. So I will be 67 on Monday. And I think we need just to recognize that we're in a long-term grassroots movement to combat age discrimination, to open up opportunities for more and more people throughout their lives. And we can see where we're going. We can see what needs to be changed. Institutions change slowly, but this is what late Congressman John Lewis said, this is good trouble.
Well, thank you again, Chris. I know you have to go. Christine, maybe if people want to stay on a little longer, if they have questions for me or you, or I see some other board members of Encore on the call. So once again, we'll be in touch with you, Chris.
Thank
You're
you.
an old and dear friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Thank
Bye now.
you. And yes, everyone, please stay on. We actually have some interesting comments. So Sheila Finkelstein actually commented about AARP had a young staff member doing their Zoom training, but not a senior. What's wrong with that picture? And Sheila herself will be 81 in December. And Sheila is really another classic example of entrepreneurship later on in life. So if you'd like to connect with her, she has some interesting projects she has going. Teresa Sansone Ferguson said she loved this. Thank you. And if you'd like to open your mics and anyone have any comments or questions for Rosemary, I see Cynthia there. Cynthia, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Hi, Rosemary. This was wonderful. I am happy to connect with you today. I would like to present to Encore. I came in contact with a group out of San Francisco. It's called Tech Enhanced Living. They're senior members who get together to evaluate products that senior citizens need. And a lot of companies go to the group and offer a product to be evaluated by seniors. And Tech Enhanced Living is run by a PhD from Stanford, and he is opening his knowledge for other persons who would like to start a similar group in their cities. And I contacted him because I was actually thinking of Encore. I was actually going to propose it to you when I spoke to you, Rosemary, but I'm giving it to you heads on to see if you can think about it. You can look it up, Tech Enhanced Technology, because I think it will be an opportunity for Encore to consider this as a source of revenue creation with seniors who want to evaluate products for companies. I think it's a unique opportunity.
I'm going to be connecting with you on Saturday, Cynthia. If you could send me an email in advance with some background information.
I sent you my phone number. I sent you the link for Tech Enhance.
If you would.
For you to look at it. They have a newsletter. They want to open up in other cities. Dr. Caro, the founder of this group, find it very interesting for seniors to get involved as a community to evaluate products that are helpful, and companies pay for these evaluations. And I thought, Encore could use this. That's my contribution for today, and I'll talk to you on Saturday. Thank you.
Oh, that's an interesting concept. That really is. That's a good idea. I mean, who isn't? I've been having a number of conversations with people, and everyone at this stage is looking for a side gig. How can I use my talents and skills to pick up a few dollars? I mean, we're all going through something right now. So it's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting idea.
Yeah, I think it's something to look into, see if it meets needs. I mean, if it can be helpful for someone to get it started here. I thought of course, getting it started, but I thought, no, I have too much to do. And so that's where I'm at right now. So I look forward to talking to you, Rosemary and Christine. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay,
Thank you,
Bye.
Cynthia.
If I can,
Dan, I see you have a question.
Yeah, well, not a question, an additional statement to Cynthia. So there's an organization called Aging 2.0. It was founded in San Francisco, I believe, but they've got chapters all over the country. And they're basically a incubator think tank for products, for devices, for services relative to the aging population.
Right.
And so I know the founder of Aging 2.0, but it's a fascinating organization, and they vet different products and services. So it may be something that you want to look into.
Okay. I have read of Asian
in
2.0.
the literature, one of the things that is being talked about more is that obviously our aging population is a huge potential market for new products and advertising and so forth. And a lot of companies haven't really reoriented their advertising, their messaging, the images that they use to appeal to a large population sector that has money to spend. So this is providing more entrepreneurial opportunities for people who are developing products for that market. Very interesting.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I see there are people still on the call. I would just like to tell you that our board is in the process of planning our programming for next year. Just because November and December are quiet months doesn't mean that we're not doing anything behind the scenes. We're developing programs around our Wisdom and Experience event that we're planning for next year. We're developing panel discussions and workshops around volunteerism. Jim Hendricks and others are going to be working on developing a men's shed, which is a gathering for older men who might be isolated and bring, so they can work on projects or learn things that would be of interest to them. And actually, long term, one of the things that we're thinking about is helping to create a coalition that is a broader group that focuses on creating an age-friendly Palm Beach County that will be focus on issues beyond work and volunteering, which has been our focus to date. The whole thing about entrepreneurship, and I was thinking as Chris was talking, that back in 1970, 71, it horrifies me to think how far back I have to go for some of these things. But I was teaching a course, I was in commercial banking at the time, and I was teaching a course at University of Hartford's graduate school in financing and managing new business ventures. And while the students were young people, the people, because of my business contacts through the banks, I brought in people who were entrepreneurs and to share, their experience with the younger people. I don't see anything like that happening. And as Chris said, it could be peer-to-peer, older entrepreneurs helping other entrepreneurs. Now, there are programs like SCORE, Service Corps of Retired Executives, and the Small Business Development Center at FAU that we have referred people to, but that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's really not much. So this whole area of entrepreneurship, it interests me because of its creative aspect. So maybe we'll be talking more about that. If anybody's interested in joining in the conversation, please let me know. But we're going to be doing a lot of things next year. I think it'll be very exciting. Any other questions?
I'm just going to go down to the last comment here from Sheila, and I think this is something that we've spoken of. Anyone use alternative words or description to aging population? And I know that's always been a soft spot for us, is using the right verbiage. So what are your thoughts on that, Rosemary?
Well, I've always felt it was very important to be, words matter. I've always believed that. and I have avoided, as everybody knows, words like senior, elderly, or anything like that. But I think we've struggled ourselves as an organization to have the right messaging, and we have plenty of company. I mean, we're not the only ones. Our first tagline on our website was connecting boomers to new careers and volunteer opportunities. Well, we've changed that to connecting people over 50 with new work and volunteer opportunities for two reasons. One, boomers has well, there's a stereotype around boomers also. And people who are 50 plus were coming to us looking for work. And they weren't necessarily boomers, you know, they were people still wanting to be in the workplace. And then we changed the word careers to work, because not everybody's looking for a career. Some people just need a job, you know, or they need a part-time job or something. So I think we always have to be sensitive. And so I tend to try to use words like 50 plus people, people 50 plus. I was using the words mature workers. I'm moving away from that. I'm moving towards experienced workers, because that's what we want to convey, that they aren't just mature, they're experienced. And experience is what's needed. So, you know, Ken Dickwald, who is in one of the premier speakers on retirement and aging, he uses a phrase third age. Well, what does that mean? You know, I mean, you were young, then you were in middle, and now you're in the third age. Well, I don't know about you all, but I'm 81. So am I in the third age? Am I in the fourth, the fifth? I'm not a boomer. I'm definitely over 50. So I think we have to be very sensitive about the words we use. Does that answer your question, Sheila?
And Chip Connolly uses modern elder, which is a total other thought process.
Yes. Well, anyway, those are my thoughts on words. So I guess, Sheila, did you unmute yourself? Did I answer your question? Are you there? I see your shoes. I see somebody's shoes.
I actually, when I went to go into my profile photo, rather than that, I inadvertently switched the camera. I'm on my iPad, so that's what did that. Yeah, I still don't have quite like the thing. I mean, elderly, I don't like either. And we are elders. I mean, I'm the elders. My cousins are the elders in our family. So we'll see. I just, somebody said that, and I was using a sunset photo, that I work with sunset years. We're in our sunset years, and I figured that was a great image for that, coaching people. And then I decided, well, I didn't like sunset years because it sounded at the end. And then I took it, well, we have the sun rises and the sun sets and the sun rises. So it's a cyclical thing. So that's fine. But how we react to something in the first place.
Well, I could tell you I didn't like the word sunset, because that's, you know, it's a going down.
Right.
I don't know about anyone else. I feel like a kid, quite frankly. Any other comments, questions? Well, we've gone a little over time.
Yes, and Rosemary, do you want to close us out?
Well, I guess we will be having a board meeting next week, and I've been in touch with all our board members, and everybody's going to be working on things that will be very engaging next year. So I would ask you if you registered for this and you aren't on our email list, then I will see that you get on it and we'll keep you posted about everything. We have a monthly newsletter that I hope everybody gets and finds interesting. Next month, Christine is going to have a class on, do you want to say just a little something about that, Christine? The title, if nothing more.
Yes, it's bringing your vision to life. And I actually just did one recently, and it's an interesting perspective on achieving the things that you truly want for your life and how to get there. So it'll be fun. It's a little interactive, and I look forward to seeing most of you there.
One of the things that Christine and other Encore people have talked about is that oftentimes people want something for their life, but they don't really know how to get it. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to visualize it, and what steps to take to get there. And you know, there aren't a lot of people around who, well, you know, when you're young, they guide you to college and you get educated and so forth and so on. Well, us older people sometimes need help in figuring out how to get what we want for our lives. So that's going to be a large focus of what we do next year. So I thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, you can always go on our website and send an email to me. And I hope we'll see you at other events.